Welcome to part 3 of our 4-part series on Kappe Writing. In this webinar lecture, we're going to be exploring how you can use your Kappe to demonstrate doctorateness. This webinar is primarily informed by the book Strategies for Writing a Thesis by Publication and has been adapted to be applied to both the social and natural sciences. But for those of you who want more specifics for your specific discipline, I would suggest if you come from the natural sciences, Jennifer Rowland's book focuses on article-based theses predominantly around these STEM fields, whereas if you are from the social sciences or humanities, I would recommend Lynn and Kristen's book. Before we investigate what doctorateness is or how to demonstrate it, a quick summary of last month's webinar is vital to prevent you from falling victim to one of the classic blunders. One problem that many people have with their Kappe is too much time is spent writing manuscripts, leaving too little time to develop and write a quality Kappe. It's also a problem that many people have not taken the time throughout the duration of their Ph.D. to develop the narrative that is going to flow through their Kappe. And overall, too little thought is given both to how you separate your research articles as well as how you build them together to create a larger cohesive research project. And ultimately, the Kappe is your PhD research project, and it's used as a demonstration of how your different research articles are going to contribute to a larger body of scientific output. But you need to realize that your Kappe is more than just a summary of the research that you have already done. However, our Kappes face unique challenges compared to writing article manuscripts because we really haven't had any training to prepare us for writing a Kappe. And that leads us to the idea that the Kappe is designed to demonstrate doctorateness. But what is doctorateness? The term is not universally defined, but according to Lynn and Kristen from their book, they describe doctorateness as something that develops throughout the PhD. It forms an independent researcher. It creates disciplinary stewards. And it develops high-quality research competence while also producing research of publishable quality that contributes to an original piece of research for the scholarly field. According to Lynn and Kristen, doctorateness is demonstrated by 5 basic qualities that should be present within your Kappe. And these include research publishability, disciplinary belonging, producing research that is original, producing a research piece that is also independent, while being cohesive. It seems like demonstrating doctorateness is simple if we only consider those 5 qualities. However, demonstrating doctorateness in a Kappe presents very unique challenges, the first being that we often have no real experience with Kappe writing. So while our articles sit at the heart of our Kappe, articles themselves are not written to demonstrate doctorateness. Instead, they are written to be part of a scientific conversation with experts in the field. And this is a problem because we really have no groundwork to demonstrate doctorateness within our articles alone, which means we face a new writing challenge that our Kappe really needs to serve a different purpose and a different audience. Also, the questions that peer-reviewed article readers are going to ask about our research writing are going to be very different questions than the PhD evaluation committee is going to ask of your Kappe. Journal readers are not really so interested in questions such as, why did you take a certain research approach when you could have taken a different approach? Or questions about how do your research questions become answered through the body of work, your research manuscripts, and how do those questions relate to other relevant questions or theories within the broader disciplinary context that you're working in? Or questions such as, what is your original and individual contribution, especially if you as an author have co-authored multiple articles that appear within your Kappe? These are challenging questions that need to be addressed in the Kappe. So, we have 2 problems. Research articles alone are not designed to be cohesive between them because they are meant to be read in isolation. And we have to shift our stance from this standalone research to find ways to connect the individual pieces together while still answering very different questions that are being pursued in each paper. A kappa forms the necessary bridges between articles to show how each one connects together and builds a larger cohesive research project. Since articles present research of standalone significance with distinct audiences, the kappa needs to work to sync each of these articles together as part of a cohesive single research project. The role of a narrative is to form connections between each article and provide the necessary information for an evaluation committee to understand how your articles connect together and why they connect together. By writing a kappa, you're attempting to provide answers to questions that the evaluation committee will ask about your work, while also showing a clear and logical flow of ideas that connect to each other and form a single, cohesive research project that answers important questions relevant to your scientific field. The kappa's narrative is the product of asking big questions about your research and producing clear and logical answers to each of these questions. These questions include: what was your research design? What were your research questions? What is your research contribution? Why was your research necessary? Why is your research contribution relevant? How did your contribution come to be? How can your contribution be applied? How have you become an expert in the field? And who benefits from your research, or who are you to be accepted as a steward of the discipline? Answering these previous questions will help you to develop your narrative and begin developing cohesion between your articles and your kappa, but we still need to demonstrate the 5 characteristics of doctorateness as well. Let's begin with publishability. Publishability is best represented by your articles. Writing and submitting your manuscripts for peer review is one way to demonstrate publishability, but your kappa and Ph.D. are not necessarily dependent on having all of your articles published. Obviously, it's unrealistic for many of us to have all of our manuscripts published due to the time required to review and resubmit our revisions. Instead, think about publishability as meaning that your manuscripts are going to be deemed of a quality that is acceptable for submission for publication. Even if rejected, your manuscripts may be seen as publishable by the evaluation committee. Generally speaking, we can think of publishability as being represented in the kappa if your manuscripts are written for a relevant scientific audience, if the research contained in each manuscript is methodologically sound, if you have a clear scientific argument presented within each manuscript, if the manuscripts are organized and coherent, and if your manuscripts apply the writing conventions of the discipline or target journal, your style, your structure, your tone, and the standards of citation and referencing. For more information on how you can write your manuscripts following these guidelines, I really recommend you take a look at a copy of Lynn Nygaard's 2015 book, Writing for Scholars, A Practical Guide for Making Sense and Being Heard. It can be possible to pass your Ph.D. if your department allows you to not have any of your manuscripts published as long as they are deemed of publishable quality. Some may expect to be at least under peer review or under revision. It's also possible to fail your Ph.D. even if all of your manuscripts have been published as articles. If your kappa is not cohesive, the evaluation committee may request that you rewrite the kappa before granting you the title of Ph.D. So do not assume that you will pass your Ph.D. program based solely on the idea that you have all of your manuscripts published. This leads us to the importance of demonstrating doctorateness through cohesiveness. Because our article manuscripts are fragmented, the kappa's structure and your narrative develops cohesiveness between each manuscript. Cohesiveness is about showing how all of your articles, published or not, stick together to form a larger research project that you are producing. A quality kappa is able to demonstrate that your research manuscripts have some connection to each other or build towards a larger contribution for your field. Cohesive writing also requires a logical structure and a flow of your ideas from introduction to conclusion. While we don't have time to talk about all aspects of writing structure for the kappa, there are 3 dimensions of cohesion that are valuable to know that are specific to kappa writing. These 3 dimensions include having thematic cohesiveness, philosophical cohesiveness, and logical cohesiveness. Thematic cohesiveness is about knowing what the focus of your research is and what you are trying to accomplish across all of your manuscripts. We can think about these themes as being our research objectives and our purpose. And if we know what these are, it's easier to know how each article contributes a piece to that overall project. Also, the Kappe is a good way to describe how a thematic focus might have changed over time from manuscript to manuscript. It may be valuable for you to try to visualize how your manuscripts connect together, answer your overarching research questions, and develop a larger contribution to the field. In this case, we can see examples of overlapping research questions that are related to various different articles. However, your research may overlap in a different way. You may have some manuscripts that build upon or partly build upon each other or are developed in complete isolation but still contribute towards answering your research questions and achieving your research aim. It's also possible that your research was non-sequential and that your articles are trying to answer the same question but maybe through different approaches, using different methods, different theories, or researching different aspects of your research question. And of course, there's also sequential cohesion, showing how each article builds towards a larger contribution while building upon the work that you had previously done in each previous manuscript. We then come to the question of philosophical cohesiveness. You should take the time to ask yourself, what are your starting assumptions? What is it that you are already positioning yourself behind from an epistemological or ontological stance? What is your research design? What are your research questions or hypotheses? And what are your methodological choices? This can allow you to focus on answering these questions for your Kappe to demonstrate philosophical cohesiveness. Do you have a unified stance across each article, or have you had an epistemological or ontological drift from article to article as your ideas have changed? Do you have alignment between your research design and the methods that you employed to answer your research questions? Do you have suitable methods to answer your research questions? And what are some of the methodological limitations of the methods that you did choose? What is it that the methods can tell us and what can't they tell us? And also, have your philosophical assumptions changed from manuscript to manuscript throughout the Ph.D.? And if so, why? Finally, we come to logical cohesiveness, which is simply about writing in a logical structure. Your Kappe should present a clear and logical line of argument from start to finish, leading your reader through the various sections of your work. Logical cohesiveness comes from developing a clear outline for your Kappe, which can help you to define your purpose for each section, what information belongs in each section or chapter, how you will transition from section to section, as well as how you're going to transition between articles from paragraph to paragraph. We already have a lot of experience writing in this way from using the IMRAD structure. However, we want to think about logical cohesiveness as developing a narrative that leads the reader through our introduction towards a substantial build-up near the end. There are different narrative structures that you can take, but you might want to consider which starting point is best for you to apply. We can think about how many different scientific narratives start and the methods used to create a substantial buildup for the reader by reviewing different research articles that we have been relying on to inform our own work. We can start out with a detective narrative, which is quite common, where a hypothesis is presented in an introduction, and that hypothesis will be attempted to be proven or disproven, whereby the answer is presented at the end of the narrative. Alternatively, you may want to take a lawyer narrative. This is where you choose to state your claim at the beginning of your Kappe and then build up substantial evidence for why this claim is true as your Kappe's narrative progresses. As a PhD, you're also becoming an advocate or a steward of your discipline. Your Kappe isn't just to show a contribution to the discipline, but to demonstrate that you are a specialized, knowledgeable person on the appropriate theories, methods, skills, and debates within the discipline. You should be able to reflect on and engage with your choice of theories, methods, and concepts and how they relate to your field, your research design, how your research questions engage with ongoing debates within your theoretical or scientific field, your understanding of the theories and the methods and the concepts that you have chosen to apply through your research. A good starting point is to look at your Ph.D. program. What is the disciplinary focus? What field or subfield do you find yourself in? What courses have you taken that are relevant to the discipline? And how do you see yourself fitting into the discipline? What is your position or the label that you want to give yourself? If you are doing interdisciplinary research, this might be a little bit more difficult to demonstrate that you have disciplinary belonging because you're often bringing in ideas from outside of the discipline. This is going to require that you're able to use the Kappe's narrative to point out problems, puzzles, or gaps within your discipline to be able to explain why external theories or methods are valid to answer any of these challenges. You still need to engage with the main ideas, theories, and concepts, as well as the methods of the discipline you find yourself in, but also justify your position and demonstrate why an interdisciplinary perspective can be helpful while still remaining rooted in your discipline. Disciplinary belonging overlaps with publishability, meaning that you're capable of applying the written conventions of your discipline as well, including the tone and structure and citation and reference style that is expected of you. Your PhD also needs to demonstrate originality, but originality doesn't always mean that you have invented or discovered something entirely new or created a new theory or accomplished something that's never been done. If you can do any of these things, congratulations, but for the rest of us, we have to demonstrate our originality in other ways. Realistically, originality means that you're able to conduct research, critically think about that research's meaning, make your own point about the research that you have conducted, and contribute this critical thought back to the scholarly discourse. Originality stems from asking questions like, what questions have I asked and why? What problems, puzzles, or gaps did I identify? What theories, methods, and/or concepts did I apply? What were my findings and my understanding of these findings? Originality is also related to how you position yourself in comparison to ongoing debates and theories within your discipline. How do you position your work relative to your discipline? Positioning requires that you include a literature review within your Kappe to identify and justify the problems, puzzles, or gaps that you are attempting to solve, while also relating your results to other people's work. This does not mean that you need to have an entire section titled literature review, but by bringing in outside sources and using references and citations to support your research also helps to fit your original ideas within this idea of disciplinary belonging. One way that you can also determine what your original contribution is to apply a cost-benefit perspective. What is it that the discipline would be unable to do without your research contribution? What are the costs if your research had not been done? Again, your contribution does not need to be groundbreaking. Oftentimes, our contributions are much smaller, but they're still important. Let's look at a few potential contributions that you might be able to make. Have you discovered or invented something new? Have you uncovered something that hadn't been seen before? Have you found new questions, new problems, new puzzles, or gaps that the discipline needs to tend to? Have you expanded upon a theory's application? Have you proven or disproven something? Have you synthesized something? Have you integrated or linked different theories, methods, or concepts together? Have you constructed or developed something? Have you strengthened or weakened a theory, a method, or a concept? Have you provided a new perspective to your field? Have you added to the weight of evidence? Have you understood something more clearly? Have you identified what not to do or where not to go with research? Have you criticized something? Have you tested something? Or have you described something? There are many different ways that you can create a research contribution. The Kappe is also used to demonstrate your independence as a researcher. The Kappa's narrative allows you to express that you are independent in your abilities to conduct research and to have the necessary research competencies and skills while engaging with the necessary higher order thinking. The Kappe is realistically a demonstration of higher ordered thinking communicated through your writing. We engage with these levels of higher thinking through the Kappe by trying to produce a new, original piece of scholarly work. However, independence isn't always that easy to demonstrate within our articles, especially if you've worked as part of a research team. That means if you have co-authored papers, you don't have an opportunity to show your specific research contribution within the manuscript. The Kappe gives you the opportunity to explicitly state to the evaluation committee what your contributions were and how those manuscripts could not have been published without for your exact and independent contribution to it. The Kappe allows you to explain exactly what you contributed to each co-authored paper, while also demonstrating your ability to present research and analytical skills that contributed to the writing of the manuscript. If you worked independently, your Kappe's narrative will leave you with much more room to discuss explicit decisions in your research that could not be present within your manuscript. The Kappe's narrative is also useful to demonstrate independence when you evaluate things like shortcomings or weaknesses in your research, any setbacks that might have occurred and why they occurred, alternative methods or approaches that could have been pursued or conducted through the research, any changes in plans, and explain why those changes had to occur. Now that we have a better understanding of the qualities that demonstrate doctorateness, you need to consider how your discipline will weigh these qualities. Not every discipline may place equal emphasis on all of these qualities, despite all of the qualities being important. You should try to demonstrate within your Ph.D. program what is most emphasized and what is least emphasized so that you know where to place the majority of your attention. But do not neglect any of these qualities while writing your Kappe. A good starting point is to speak to your supervisor or head of your Ph.D. program within your department and ask for Kappe guidelines. It may also be worthwhile to review past Kappes that have been published from your program or your department to see how doctorateness is being demonstrated by others. These qualities of demonstrating doctorateness can have specific places where they belong within the structure of your narrative, and knowing where each of these qualities can be logically demonstrated within your Kappe's sections or chapters requires that you know what is expected of your Kappe within your discipline. This will be the topic of next month's webinar.